And, looking back on this story I just told, no one told me a lot of things.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But this is the one that I was, like, most upset about. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it seems really obvious when they were explaining the surgery that I wouldn't have my birthmark anymore. But, like, I just wasn't expecting it. And it took me really aback. And the way I felt about it took me really aback. Where, like, I've been seeing a therapist or social worker through my school ever since I was in kindergarten. But for, like, a year and a half after my surgery, like, we just talked exclusively about this because I was so upset about it.
Hey there, and welcome to In Sickness and in Health, a podcast about chronic illness, disability, medical traumas, and everyday uncomfortable healthcare experiences. My name is Cara Gale. I'm not a doctor or a medical professional. I'm just a person and a patient who really wants to talk about this stuff more. Nothing said on this show should ever be considered medical advice. If you're experiencing a medical issue, please seek qualified medical help. I know the system sucks, but I do wish you a lot of luck. Every person is different, even within disease groups, so none of my guests should ever be regarded as official representatives or spokespersons for their conditions. Please respect their very personal choices, and unless they ask for it, please don't make suggestions about treatments or lifestyle changes. Unsolicited medical advice is never not annoying. I'm going to keep this intro short because I'm feeling pretty crappy, but this is the first of many episodes to come about traumatic medical experiences. Well, pretty much the whole show is about traumatic medical experiences, but I don't think we really talked about that very directly yet. Next week will be another episode that talks more about medical traumas and where they fit into the landscape of post-traumatic stress responses. For today's episode, we talk about some of what Sol has been through during her childhood, including 3 skin expander surgeries following the removal of a birthmark on Sol's head. Faye talks about those surgeries, being undermedicated most of that time, finding out about a codeine allergy the hard way, not realizing how traumatic it all was until later, and how that's complicated the process of transitioning from pediatric to adult care. In today's bonus episode, we talk about needle phobia and figuring out Sol was autistic late in their teens. You can find resources and more from us at insicknesspod.com and on social media at insicknesspod. Please shoot me an email at insicknesspod@gmail.com, and if you can, please rate and review us on iTunes. It helps other people find the show. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Big birthmark on my forehead, on the right side, from my hairline all the way through an eyebrow, out through my past above my ear. And no one, like, it was cool, hair grew from it like the rest of the hair on my head, and I had this birthmark, until I had my first surgeries, and the problem with it was there was this bump that started to form on my head, on the top of my head, behind this birthmark. And it started off really small, and so no one was particularly worried about it because, sometimes kids just have weird bumps. But it got bigger and bigger, and we didn't really know what it was, and I got taken to a lot of doctors and a lot of specialists. And I remember particularly an incident where I was taken to the basement of a hospital and put in a little tiny room, and then all these doctors and med students and nurses and experts from all across the country paraded through this little room and poked and prodded and looked at my bump with these magnifying glasses. And it was about 100 people who were touching my head that day trying to figure out what this thing was. because I don't remember what it's called, but it's this rare, obscure thing where it's a bunch of skin and hair cells that were just growing out of control in a tumor.
A
And it's a really,
teratoma? Is that the name? Or
I don't
something
know.
like
I
it?
was
Yeah.
like 8 or 5
Okay.
when this happened, so
Yeah.
I don't remember the official name. But it's this rare thing that took them a long time to figure out. But then when they figured out what it was like, oh yeah, that thing. Like, not a big deal. It's not cancerous. The deal with me is that it might, like, it just grows a lot. It grows to be really big, and it might have grown to cover an eye, which would have been, really deforming to live with a giant mass of skin and hair cells that covered part of my face. And then also it would really affect me for not being able to like see out of one eye. So I had it removed. And another like origin story through this when they were trying to figure it out. I don't remember if this was before or after the parade of doctors. Um, but like we came into all these doctors' offices and with photos of me from a baby, and we'd tell them all about this birthmark and this bump. And one of the times we were going through this exercise, I was taken in a small exam room away from my parents, and they removed a portion of this bump. And I was 8 years old when this happened, and they didn't give me any anesthesia or anything to numb the pain locally or throughout my entire body. They just had 3 nurses holding me down as someone else cut into my scalp to remove a section of this bump that they could look at under a microscope and help them figure out what it was. And my parents did not know this happened, like talking with them later, because, like I was in this room screaming for their help because they didn't explain to me that what was happening either. And then when they let me out, like they let me calm down in this room for a little while. When they let me out, my parents were sitting on the other side of the door, and I just remember feeling so betrayed when I was like finally allowed to rejoin them, because I was like, you were standing out there the entire time, like couldn't you hear me? Couldn't you at least come in and hold my hand? Like, what were they doing? What was this for? But eventually, like, we did find out, oh, it's this bump, it's this thing, it's not a big deal, you're gonna have it removed. And we lived in Chicago at the time, and there's the guy who does the skin expander surgeries, like the professional, like, big wig people from China come and have these surgeries done by him because he's the best in the world. That guy. Since we lived in Chicago and since my mom worked in the medical school I think that he like worked in, it might have been a different one, but she's also a big person in a medical school, not in a doctor sense, in a dean administrator sense. She was able to get a slot from him that someone else had canceled, and so they just gave me the slot. Since, yay, I'm so privileged that got to happen. And so it was like I was told, okay, this is what the bump is, that you have not known what it was for years and years, and you went through this traumatic, ripping it out, part of it out of your head to figure out what it is. This is what it is. It's not a big deal. You're going to have it removed in surgery in a month. And then I went through my first surgery ever. And it started off really nice. Some nurses came and they explained to me about I might wake up with a breathing tube. I might wake up with those electrodes on my chest. I might wake up with one of those things that clamps on your finger and detects your oxygen levels. And just sort of showing me mannequins with these things on it and really nicely explaining all this to me. And I was like, okay, this seems cool. Like, I can totally handle this. I was 10 years old when this was happening, and I picked out my, the flavor for my anesthesia. I had like a half-hour discussion.
Wait. They
Am
make
I going too
flavored
fast?
anesthesia?
They do, yeah.
Wow. I did not know that. Do you remember the selection of flavors that they had?
I do. They had orange, banana, strawberry, grape. Like the flavors for the fluoride crap on your teeth? It's basically like that, so they had bubble gum. They did not have mint, disgusting. Which I would have chosen mint if they had mint. But they had a couple of their flavors. Those are the ones I really remember.
Okay.
So I picked my flavor. I ended up going with orange, I can't really remember, like, it was my dad's dad was urging me to go with orange, and I don't really remember why. But we had, like, this really big discussion in the hospital room while we were waiting for doctors and paperwork and other stuff that, like, when you're doing your first day of surgery, there's a lot. Oh my God, there's a lot of
So
steps
much.
involved
Yeah.
before they put you on that operating table. So while we were waiting, like, my parents were engaging me by discussing this, and I felt so good about my choice. And it was, being herded from one thing to the other. At the time, I remember it being really fun, and I had my little stuffed dog. That's my comfort object, and they gave it a little bracelet, like a little medical bracelet to match my bracelet, and I still have that, by the way. And then I was put on the gurney I feel like I actually went through surgery in my clothes, which I think is weird and unusual, but I woke up in my clothes, but they took my clothes away from me at one point. So I don't really remember how that happened. But they rolled me into the hospital room, and it was actually, it was in February this happened. I don't think it was February 10th. It might have been February 10th.
That's weird, because today is actually February 10th.
I just realized that
Wow.
this might be the anniversary of my first surgery. Yeah, wow.
Congratulations!
Yeah, it would be my 9th anniversary if it was. Wow. So they wheel me in, and they put me under, and I'm counting backwards from 10. And I think it's pretty good. Like, being kind of blacking out from anesthesia was a really cool experience for me. I was, like, really aware of just, like, losing consciousness, and I was like, this is so fascinating.
Yeah.
But then I woke up just feeling absolutely horrible. Like, I couldn't open my eyes, which they were bruised shut from... the head surgery is head trauma, and your eyes bruise. You get raccoon eyes whenever you go through really bad head trauma. And I'd also been given a medication that we later found out I was allergic to, codeine.
Oh, that's always fun.
Yeah, which made the eyes bruising so much worse. So I could not open my eyes for the first several hours after surgery. My throat was so raw. I'm really prone to getting sore throats in the winter. Like, every year I get a sore throat for about a week to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
This was the worst sore throat I had ever had in my life. And, like, everything about my body just really, really hurt. And I was still, like, exhausted and confused, and I didn't know where my parents were, and I really wanted water. And so I don't even know where I am, by the way, when I wake up. So I'm going through all this confusion, and I just say, water, like, several times before anyone can even hear that I'm asking for water. And I don't remember why, but until I got settled into the, like, bed I was staying in, they wouldn't give me any water. Which I don't even know why to this day, but, like, that was really, like, that made me even more scared.
Yeah.
And my parents weren't there immediately because I hadn't been moved in the, like, after surgery room. I was in the after, like, the before the after surgery room. And, so I did finally get settled with my parents, and I could, like, creak my eyes open a little bit, and if they stood really, really close to my face, I could tell it was my parents. So once we were reunited, I felt more comfortable. I felt like 10 times worth post-surgery. But instead of throwing up, I burped. And my burp tastes like orange Tang.
Oh, wow.
The stuff you use to clean out of your dishwasher. Yeah. So flavored anesthesia was a terrible idea. Because that did not go away for a full 24 hours after my surgery. Oh, gross. It was so bad. Yeah, surgery's so much fun. I had such a hard time walking. And I don't really understand the, like, bladder freeze thing, because they made a really big deal when it got close to being, I don't remember how long after surgery, but, like, I needed to pee after a certain amount of time after surgery, and even though I did not want to get up out of my bed, they made me get up out of my bed and sit on the toilet until I peed, and then the nurses were all really happy. And I still don't know what's up with that.
Yeah, I think it's just, you know, because they do the same thing with pooping. Like, usually you can't get discharged until you have a bowel movement or something like that. And I think just to make sure that your bladder and your bowels are working, and I don't know. Yeah,
So
it's a weird thing when they hold you hostage so that you can defecate.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Especially I have pooping problems now. I did not have when I was younger. So like I could legitimately like stay in the hospital for a week because I just don't have bowel movements that
Yeah.
often. And it's concerning, but you know there are other worse things in my life. Um, so the days after hospital, I guess, were pretty nice. I slept a lot. I was still, despite the like pain meds I was on, I was still in a lot of pain. I was still very foggy and like my body felt very very heavy the entire time. And I had drainage tubes. Which I had the little vacuum ones after my first surgery, which I hated those, and because I could feel the like them draining fluid from under my skin, and they put them in a terrible spot because I had a like skin expander on my forehead to get rid of the birthmark, and then I had one on the back of my head to get rid of the bump, and there was a big bruise, you know, or just pocket of stuff building up between those two, and they put the drainage tubes on the side of my head so they weren't able to drain where the fluid was actually building up. Which just, it felt so bad to have this pocket of fluid on my head. But then when they put the drainage tubes in, I could feel it sucking, and I'll still sometimes have phantom sucking sensations of like fluid moving around the skin, between skin and skull. And like, you know, like Charlie horses are bad. That sensation is so much worse. I'm getting like shivers just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And my dad's so weird. My dad's very like anti-medication, and after I was discharged from the hospital, he gave me like a week break from this each time. But I had the drainage tubes in for I think 3 weeks, maybe longer. Every time I wanted ibuprofen, like while we were training the drainage tubes, he'd give me this big long speech of like, oh, are you sure you need it? Are you sure the pain's not gonna go away on its own in a few minutes? Like, I don't want you to get hooked on this stuff. And, you know, so I believed for a really long time that you could get hooked on ibuprofen from these speeches I was given.
Do you still like have a hard time taking medication, like when you need it?
Sort of. I worked really hard with a therapist sort of around this, especially when I was put on an antidepressant. It was a big problem. And also I had really, really bad period cramps up until I started going on birth control. And so I was dealing with these really bad cramps from the time I started menstruating, which was when I was 12, I think, to up until I was 17. I was dealing with all of this mostly unmedicated because I was scared to take medication. And no one else took my pain very seriously, so I was never actually given a heating pad. I didn't even know we owned heating pads until fairly recently.
Aren't they the best?
I would occasionally make a heating pad by taking a damp paper towel and microwaving it, and that was my makeshift heating pad for a night. But yeah, it was. I have had a lot of, experiences of just feeling really guilty about taking medication too, like not taking it when I needed it, and then being affirmed of like, oh, you actually didn't need it because period cramps aren't that bad.
Yeah, that's really common, even when you don't get a 15-minute lecture on taking ibuprofen as a kid.
Yeah, and then there was a time where I got whapped in the nose playing the Israeli kickball game that involves the octagon wooden whatever. People who know this game will know what I'm talking about. I got whapped in really hard playing that game and blacked out and was taken to the emergency room and refused pain, medication, even though I was like really, really out of it. Like they were sure I was concussed, but I was actually just in a lot of pain. I wasn't concussed. Because, yeah, like, you know how when you get in a lot of pain, you act really weird sometimes?
Yep.
Yeah, and I especially having gone through several painful experiences as a child, like I act like a young child because I'm just put back into those old memories of being in pain, and then also it comes with this feeling of really really needing to be taken care of, and acting like a child has always people have always taken care of me, which is cute, and I've formed strong memories with the people who did end up taking care of me during that incident. Like they gave me gauze because I got this little cut on my nose, like little cut, but it bled profusely. Um, and so they gave me all these gauze pads, and they had me like holding some to my nose, and then they also put like a ton on my lap when I was being wheeled around in a wheelchair at the hospital. And I don't know why I did it, like what the thought process was, but I took apart all of the gauze pads in my lap and I like draped them on my head. And I was like, I'm the beekeeper. And people thought it was really cute. But, that's not something a 15-year-old is supposed to do at the hospital. um, so, yeah. And so the one time that I did end up taking codeine, he made a much bigger deal about that. And then, of course, we found out I'm allergic. But I'll get to that story in a second. Because I'm sort of going in order here. The other thing was when I had these drainage tubes, I was going to school, so I had 2 to 3 days in the hospital post-surgery. I had 1 day resting at home, and then they sent me straight back to school the very next day.
Wow.
Yeah, which was fast and intense. And I had to wear a scarf on my head so that other kids didn't have to see these drainage tubes. Which, like, we kids over, in middle school, not able to handle the sight of drainage tubes and blood. Like, that's what I was thinking in my head. Like, I got cut open over here, and you can't handle me sitting in front of you in class with drainage tubes. And it was also like, I had my expanders, and you can't really hide expanders with a scarf. Like, it's really obvious that, someone's head is deformed when they have 2 giant skin expanders. A lot of the teachers sort of ran damage control. My sister also fielded a lot of questions, but it really was like they were just socially aware enough to know like not to talk to me about this, which I appreciated. But about that, and I also didn't have a lot of friends in the first place. Like, I was the socially awkward kid that everyone just ignored. So they just kept on ignoring me, and I was cool with that. But the thing was, I don't know how my parents or the school told the teachers about what was going on. 'Cause there was, a rumor, and I heard this very secondhand, so like when I ended up telling my dad about it years later, he's very suspicious that this actually happened. But other people in my school had heard this had happened. Like that's sort of the point I'm getting at. I was told by a friend of a person in the relevant classroom that that there was a teacher who told all her classes that I had had a lobotomy.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and I was always in the disabled student classes. And everyone else knew I was in the disabled student classes, and like I was an autistic kid. I didn't have a diagnosis, but like looking back, I was a very clearly autistic kid. And her thing was, this teacher's thing was, Soul had a lobotomy, and that's, now they're not going to act weird anymore. They're not going to act disabled and crazy anymore. So they're good now, and you can be their friend. Which at the time I didn't know what a lobotomy was. Yeah. I didn't care, and my dad, when I told him this story years later, was like, why didn't you ever tell me this? And the answer was, like, I just had major surgery for the first time in my life. It wasn't a priority. But then also, I faced a lot of mistreatment in my disabled class, which I had told him about later, and I told my mother about later. But at the time, it just seemed totally normal. I was like, yep, this is how teachers who run the disabled class, this is how they treat their students, and this is normal, and this is expected, and I had been treated this way all my life. How was I supposed to know that teachers weren't supposed to treat their students this way? This transitions into my getting the expanders removed. So this was about 6 months, I think, after my initial surgery, and we put, expanded the skin expanders with saline solution. I don't remember how often, but they're at least like 2.5 times bigger than they were when they started, and I think maybe even 3 times bigger. They were really big. Like my head was basically 2 heads, maybe a little more. And so I just had a really bad day. I thought I was getting sick one day, and I went to school anyway. I toughed through it, but then that night I was in a lot of pain, and I hadn't been in like that much pain since the initial surgeries, and I was having a hard time sleeping. So I told my dad all this, and I asked for codeine, and he gave me a really big lecture about not taking codeine, and went on and on and on. But finally, I'm like, I'm so tired. I just want to sleep, and I won't be able to sleep unless I'm not in pain anymore. And I took ibuprofen like this many hours ago, and I'm still in pain, and I need to not be in pain. I need to go to sleep. I have a big test tomorrow. So he eventually gave in and let me have the medicine. I went upstairs, went back to sleep, probably stopped breathing in my sleep, and woke up around midnight feeling really, really cold in my hands and feet, and really confused about why I'd gone to sleep, but also really aware that like something was wrong and I should probably go downstairs and talk to my parents. And I slept in a bunk bed at this time.
Oh no.
So it took me like probably 45 minutes to climb down from my bunk bed and scoot my butt all the way down the stairs very slowly because I was dizzy and out of it and having a hard time breathing. And my parents were watching TV in the room across from the entryway, and I couldn't get like from the bottom of the entryway stairs like to the room. So I was just laying on my back, and I called out, "Mom, Dad, something's wrong." And of course they pause their TV show, and Mom runs over, and Dad's much more leisurely about getting himself off the couch and getting himself to look at me. And I don't remember too much about that. I remember describing my symptoms of, and I was like, the way I was talking was I would take a breath, I would say a word, I would exhale, I would take a breath, say a word, and exhale, like very slowly, hard to get words out. And sort of trying to explain my symptoms to them. And for some reason, we didn't get an ambulance. We totally should have gotten an ambulance, but we didn't. So my dad drove me to the ER. And I almost fell asleep again in the car, and I was feeling a lot better. I wanted to go back to sleep. I wasn't in pain because, hey, codeine is awesome about pain, even though it, killed me almost. So he's like, do you want to just go back home? I mean, you have this test tomorrow. We could totally go back home. And I'm like, no, we should see what this is. Like, I don't want to either, but Mom's going to be mad at you if you don't finish this hospital trip with me. So they take me to the ER, and the steps from right outside the where I got dropped off to like inside, I was so winded. I was back to being just as bad as I was when I woke up and tried to get down the stairs in the first place. So as my dad is like checking me in and going over all our insurance, I was directed to sit in a chair, and after like a minute of that, I was like, yeah, this isn't working, I can't breathe. So I lay down on the floor, and it went from like, yeah, whatever, we'll get to you in like 2 hours to, okay, get up and get on the skirting.
So there's a lesson to be drawn from this. You go to the emergency room, just lay down on the floor, and they might take you more seriously.
They also might not. It helps if you can't breathe.
Yeah, that definitely does help.
They poked and prodded me. I don't know when they found out it was allergic reaction. I had a CAT scan done, which the IV for the CAT scan was the most painful IV I've ever had in my life. Yeah. It felt like my veins were on fire.
Yeah, I've never had contrast, but that's what I hear. It sounds terrible.
And they didn't tell me. They were like, this won't hurt a bit. Oh, no. Which, I'm used to doctors lying.
Right.
But, in that case, I think they should be honest, because there's, the pain level I expect when they say, oh, this won't hurt a bit. But that's not that pain level. That pain level is, this is going to be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's still understating it.
But it at least, lets you brace yourself.
Yeah, and lets me know that, okay, this one's supposed to hurt.
Right.
A lot. So that was the next morning I had that done. They thought there was something wrong with my lungs was the big concern. There wasn't, but my aorta goes the different way than everybody else's way.
Oh, interesting.
So there is nothing wrong with me in that sense. I don't know when we figured out it was codeine. But then I had the CAT scan and then they sent me right back to school. So I missed my morning classes that day. Or it might have even been the day after. But anyway, like right after this codeine incident, I had a fever, but we didn't know I had a fever because, like, come on, when you've gone through all that, you know, a low-grade fever just doesn't really show
not a
up
big
on,
deal.
yeah, on the radar when you're like, you know, my head hurts and I feel kind of hot. It's just like, whatever, go to school anyway.
Yeah.
You've gone to school going through worse. And so I was studying for a test, and fifth grade was the only good teacher I had for this one, who was really kind and understanding and treated disabled students like regular students and respected them. And so, like, we're studying from the paper, studying up on the board, and I'm taking notes, and then I, like, look down to my paper to see what I've written, and this big glob of pus just runs off the top of my forehead expander and splats onto my paper. It was probably like a fourth of a cup of pus.
Oh, wow.
So I excused myself to the bathroom because I didn't know it was pus at the time. I was like, what is this shit? So I excused myself to the bathroom, and as I bend over the mirror to get another good look at it, like, it all just runs down my face again. And it's hot, and there are these, like, clumps of gritty stuff in it. And I go back to my teacher, and I show her my paper with the gunk on it, and I say, I think something's wrong. And she sent me to the nurse's office. And then my parents showed up, and they were like, yep, you've got a really bad infection. They called the doctor, and the next morning I had emergency surgery to have the expanders removed.
Oh, wow.
Which had been, we'd planned to keep them in for another month, I think. So we didn't get it all done. I had to do it again, and at the end of my first round, instead of having vacuum suction tubes, they gave me the, like, big bulb ones. Like, if
to, like,
you
pump it.
Not pumping, but just letting gravity do it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So if you get chest surgery, the trans chest surgery, if you get that done, that's the same drainage tubes you have, which I'm trans, and I hang out in a lot of trans spaces. And whenever someone in our support group is getting chest surgery, like, I just can't show up until they have those tubes out because I just can't see those tubes. No.
Yeah.
You know? I don't mean to be, you know, like, horrible about it, but the first time I didn't tell anyone it was a problem for me, and it ended up causing a lot of problems in terms of, like, me, you know, like, me being very uncomfortable in this space I should have been comfortable with, and me being standoffish towards people and not meaning to, and just all sorts of problems.
Yeah. At that time, did you realize, like, before you were in that situation, did you realize that that might be an issue for you, or did you find yourself in this situation and then be like, I'm freaking out?
Yeah, the second one.
Yeah.
Definitely the second one. Which is kind of hard because my partner is now talking about having chest surgery, which, like, great, go them. Like, that's probably the right choice for them. But I need to, like, not be around them for the month that they have those tubes in.
Yeah.
I can support them in other ways. I can support them, you know, long distance. But we're just not going to meet face to face until those tubes are out. Which they understand. They're wonderful.
That's good.
It is. It's really good. But so those are, like, those tubes, they stay in for a long time. And because of my infection and sort of the infection risk associated with these tubes, which the infection was why we switched tubes, we needed to, I didn't basically go to school until they were out, which, you know, was pretty awesome. Yeah. I was also, like, post-infection was pretty exhausted from you know, the surgeries, like, even more so. Like, they didn't put me on codeine again because they were like, oh, you're allergic to it. And my raccoon eyes were much better. I recovered much faster. Like, when they like started bugging me to get up and pee, it wasn't like a big, like, oh, I'm so tired, I just want to sleep. It was like, yeah, okay, I can do this right now. So I was walking around much faster. The problem of, like, anesthesia burp flavors was much better. I picked strawberry the second time, by the way. And, like, all in all, like, it was just a better round of surgery, but, like, when I got home, I was still really tired, and I think it was the switching tubes.
Yeah, switching tubes, and also when your body is fighting an infection, like, that can be really exhausting.
So I laid around and slept a lot and watched Star Trek, and it was nice. It was also kind of lonely, and I still felt terrible. And then they took the tubes out, which was, oh my god, it was the worst thing ever, because these tubes have square ends, but the tubes themselves are round, so you're pulling a square out of a round hole. And when they took this out, it was also when they were taking out the other 1,000 stitches I had. So they were taking this out, and they didn't cut all the stitches. So when this person is pulling the tube out of my head, not only are they pulling this square tube, square end out of a round hole, but they also pull off a good chunk of skin with it, because they didn't cut all the stitches. And of course I'm sitting there screaming, and they're like, it's not a big deal. And then of course when it comes up with the patch of skin, they're like, okay, your screaming was valid. I hated that.
Yeah.
That was terrible.
Sounds awful.
Yeah, I don't even remember what the rest of that doctor's visit was about, because, it hurt so much more than the other tubes, and, they were bigger, so I would have thought that, they hurt less for some reason. And then when, they pull them out and, I can see them, I'm like, oh, no wonder this hurt. So that was fun, and then we went through, so then I had my summer off, and the other thing was I had long hair, about as long as I had now, and to put the skin expanders in, they didn't shave all my head, so I had half of my head had no hair and half of my head had hair.
You were so ahead of your time.
No, it wasn't
so in
like
now.
that. I would have been fine if it was like that, but it was they shaved part of the side of my head, yes, but the entire back of my head was gone. It was like a reverse mullet was what it was like. But so then we had to cut off the rest of my hair after the expanders was done. So I'm walking around with expanders for my entire 5th grade school year. But worse than that, I have this terrible haircut. So we cut off the rest of my hair, so it looked, so when my head was back at its normal size, it looked decent. But then, my head also looked like raw meat, because that's what healing new skin just looks like. It's so gross. And then there's this little corner that they didn't quite get to, that I still have. That was so gross. That was a huge scab the size of 3/4 put in a little triangle for the longest time. It didn't scar over, I think, until the next surgery. And then they were like, that's such a small spot, let's not deal with it again, I think. So I came in for my second round, and my third surgery, and I was like, let's not do the anesthesia flavors anymore. Those are all gross. I'm just gonna do plain anesthesia. And I was also since the day after waking up from surgery is literally the worst thing ever, I'm just gonna sleep for that entire day, and to make myself sleep for the entire day, I'm gonna stay up late playing video games, which seemed like an awesome plan when you're 11, right? So I do this, and I loved the staying up late and playing video games part, and I told my parents, so they were like, oh, that sounds like a plan, and they let me stay up playing video games until 5 in the morning. So I wasn't complaining about being hungry or thirsty or any of this other stuff, because I was just so dang tired as I'm going through my surgery prep that it doesn't even occur to me to be I'm hungry, I want food.
Yeah.
So they they put me through surgery, and I wake up and I'm really, really tired, and I have burps, and the burps that aren't flavored are the worst. The others were bad, but non-flavored burps, oh my god, I felt like I ate a skunk. Yeah. But so I'm just this was a good plan. I'm going to sleep for the entire day today, and everything's going to be good. So I did. And, I woke up in the middle of the night, because that's just what happens when you sleep all day, even when you go through major surgery. And I still had the gross burps.
Oh.
And I was like, no, I planned against this. And so I had 24 hours of gross burps, but it was just the 24 hours after the first 12 hours of surgery. And I don't know if that was worse or not. Having it unexpectedly, I think, was bad.
Gross burps in general, whether you've just had surgery or not, are just awful.
Yeah. And the second round compared to the first was fairly uneventful. I went through it. I was in mostly good humor. I didn't require a CAT scan, so I didn't get a terrible feeling IV. I did get my saline solution instead of, my dad missed a port one time, so instead of being injected into my expanders, it was just injected into the muscles in my neck, which that's my 10 on the pain scale, by the way.
Yeah.
I think it was something like 15 milliliters. Like a full syringe. I don't remember the measurements, but yeah, we were at a full syringe at that point, and he thought I was just fussing because I didn't have numbing cream on my port, but that wasn't why. And then when he realized his mistake and the fact that we'd have to do it again, which we were in a hurry, he told me that he used to spank us, so he told me that this was my punishment for some future crime, which I have still hold on to this, and I remind my mom every so often so that she'll keep his word. Terrible parenting on my dad's part, by the way. But I had horrible anger management issues at the time, and he would tell me that I would get into a fight as an adult and be sent to jail. He'd tell me this would happen, and God. So I was thinking all right, this get out of jail free card that I have from my dad stabbing me and injecting saline solution into my neck, I'm going to use that for when I'm an adult and I get in jail. Yeah, so I had the expanders taken out, and then I had so many stitches. I think I had 10,000 over the course of these 4 surgeries. I think I had 10,000 stitches total. After my surgeries, my surgeon quit being a surgeon because he had really bad carpal tunnel syndrome.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, but he was A+ at stitching. I have really nice scars, and it was really funny because I saw him recently in 2014, and I shaved my head for an art project I was doing where I took a plaster molding of my head and all my scars, and he was really disappointed that I had my head shaved, because he was like, "You have such pretty hair, doesn't it cover your scars?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I think they're beautiful scars," and he really didn't get that. And gave me all these options about different procedures that could be done to shrink my scars. But the one thing that happened the second surgery that still hasn't really been fixed is the skin expander I had on my forehead, so I guess this was the first surgery, was so heavy and was exerting so much pressure on my skull that it bent my eyebrow ridge, it bent the skull there.
Wow.
And that, I just had a dent there for a really long time. It did eventually, pop back out, but it really affected the muscles around my eyes. So I just recently was able to, move my eyebrows. That was, within the last 2 years, I was able to start doing that again. But I just have this one, saggy eye. That when I smile really wide, only one eye is open and the other eye closes, and I think it looks horrible. Yeah, and then, I had really bad, dysphoria sort of thing, which one of the things I really liked about coming into the trans community is that people talk openly about, with their chests and other surgeries, talking about how this is something they really, really wanted to do, but then when they woke up and their body was all different, there's weird negative feelings that come with that, even if this is a change you wanted. And after 2 years, I didn't have my birthmark anymore and my hairline that I've always had, and I got really depressed about that.
You're not the first person to talk about this that I've talked to. It seems to be pretty common when you have something that's a part of you for so long, even if it's horrible or really causing a lot of dysphoria or whatever the case may be, to suddenly have it not be there anymore is really weird and disconcerting.
Yeah, and no one told me, and looking back on this story I just told, no one told me a lot of things.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But this is the one that I was most upset about. It seems really obvious when they were explaining the surgery that I wouldn't have my birthmark anymore, but I just wasn't expecting it, and it took me really aback. And the way I felt about it took me really aback. Where I've been seeing a therapist or social worker through my school ever since I was in kindergarten. But for a year and a half after my surgery, we just talked exclusively about this because I was so upset about it. And I'm I feel pretty adjusted to my appearance now. It took me a while to accept my scars, um, and really think that they're beautiful. And, like even shaving my head was really what got me to do that. Like I put myself in a position where I peer pressured myself into shaving my head because I still had, uh, I was still a little worried about it. But once I did, like I felt so free. And I felt so free to love my scars and think they're so interesting and beautiful and really accept them as being part of me. Um, but yeah,
That's
that was a
awesome.
really long, hard journey.
Yeah.
Hard one.
It sounds like it. And to be so young, too,
Yeah.
while going through it, like that's a whole other thing. Like as
Yeah.
if puberty isn't bad enough on its own.
Yeah, and at the time, like people called me brave, and at the time, like I didn't feel brave. I felt very happy-go-lucky. Like I just wasn't processing anything that happened to
Yeah.
me until years later, and
Yeah.
that's another big thing that like no one really understands in my life. Like my parents were there, and they don't understand how, after in eighth grade was when I feel like this caught up to me. They just didn't understand why I was suddenly upset about it. They were like, "It happened. It's in the past," and I was like, "Yeah." But it sucked. And it was like, I just didn't realize how much it sucked until that moment.
Yeah.
And like, I basically guess I was giving myself permission to feel anything about what I went through. Um, so yeah, that's my origin story.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I'm sorry you had to go through all that. That sucks.
Yeah.
The other thing that you said in our emails was that, you, as a result of kind of like all of this stuff that you've been through as a kid, you're really hesitant to kind of move forward with seeking medical care as an adult,
Yeah.
which I think is something that's pretty common for people that are transitioning from pediatric to adult care. There's not really like any sort of system in place to like help that happen more smoothly, and just the difference between pediatric and adult care is so stark. Like I definitely had no idea that they made flavored anesthesia. They do not offer that to adults. Uh, so like as things like that, children's hospitals are always like, brightly colored and the nurses all wear cute scrubs, and then all of a sudden you're in an adult hospital and everything's gray and terrible and everyone's miserable. So can you talk a little bit about, I guess being at that transitional stage where now you're a quote unquote grown up and have to kind of pursue medical care for yourself, and being really hesitant to do that?
Yeah. So my transition out of pediatric care also really includes my like literal trans transition, because I went to I started, instead of going to my regular pediatrician, I started going to this hormone doctor for basically, like unless it was semi like emergency concern, like the first time I started having really bad like non menstrual related cramps, I scheduled a meeting with my regular pediatrician to talk to her, because I meet with my other pediatrician about twice a year, and that's it. um, but so my gender specialist is, I think, what she's called. She's sort of who I see. I think I was supposed to see her soon-ish to get my hormone prescription again. But she's basically what I see for everything. I summarize all my problems to her, like medical-wise, and sort of we rank them together of like what's a big concern that we need to address, and what's like a small concern. I had really bad headaches. I mean, like worse than my normal right now headaches, that were tension headaches due to carrying too large a backpack, and she was the one who troubleshooted too heavy a backpack, so she troubleshooted this with me. She wrote my doctor's notes for that. But that's, of course, something I totally could have gone to my regular pediatrician with. It's just that this clinic really specialized in a therapy sort of aspect of health. They they have a therapist there as one of their main staff just to talk to people. It's supposed to be about gender stuff, but just knowing that my doctor works like really closely with a therapist, and going to therapy sessions in the same building.
Yeah, that's
And
amazing.
really,
I think we could all use that,
yeah,
regardless.
yeah, and like all of that was awesome. Um, and I've sort of aged out of it, it's supposed to be a pediatrics thing, but they do continue to serve through 18, 19 years old, but they really try to get you to go somewhere else
Yeah.
when you get older. So I started going there when I was 17, and I'm 19 now. And I'm not really sure where I'm going to go next. There's my Temple campus, their student health thing. But anyway, one really big thing there was after I had a really bad gynecological experience, which was the only experience, like, I've been through a lot of traumatic things not medical related. That's the only one that I have flashbacks of.
Yeah.
So I went to the therapist for this gender specialist, and we talked about it and had a lot of great therapy sessions. And then, like with my gastrointestinal butt stuff, I really needed that to get looked at because it was possible I had a soft tissue infection. Like, so much fun, right?
Yeah.
And
But
so,
stuff always fun.
So I talked to the therapist really in depth before it was going to happen, and I brought my dad to the gynecologist in the first place because, like, I wanted him to be there and read my body language and advocate my right and, like, talk to the doctor for me while I'm, like, so paralyzed and upset about being in a medical setting that, like, my communication is impaired. Like, I needed him to be there. And so since he epically failed at doing that,
Surprise.
yeah, I couldn't trust him to sit with me for any other medical exam. And then my mom, she's the working parent. She has a job. She can't take off work just to take me to what should be a routine medical care. So my therapist was the person to stand in the corner and, calm me down and talk to me and talk to the doctor. And when I was talking to the doctor, I was talking about, like, please don't touch me in these ways with this type of pressure. Please don't call my body parts these things. Like, let's just not talk about my body parts at all. Please do this and not this. And, even before we got into that conversation, I just got to talk to her a little bit about, like, my art and what I'm doing and how my life is. And sort of really, since when I was a kid in the hospital, no one talked to me about these things. They're just like, you're here for the surgery and we're going to prep you for it, and then you're going to have the surgery and then you're gone. And we're not going to, you're just a cog in the machine. You're not a person. And in some ways that's comfortable. Sometimes I just want to get in and out of there as fast as possible. I don't want to have to think about it. But that's, like, just because it's comfortable doesn't mean it's healthy and doesn't mean it's the right way to approach it. But having a really successful feeling, where most doctors are like, how are you? Like, that's not a good question, for me to open up about myself. It's never been. But being told, hey, so I hear you're at this school. Like, how's school doing? What's your favorite classes? Is there a project you're working on that you really like? Having that sort of conversation is great. And, my therapist really encouraged that to keep going. When she could tell, like, oh, I'm not ready for this exam, I'm still uncomfortable, she said, why don't you talk to Sol about, this, and this, because we start therapy sessions the same way. So she was like, ask Sol about Sol's art, and the doctor did. And then I had the butt exam, and it was uncomfortable, but I wouldn't call it traumatic, and that was amazing. Because I feel like I had never had after my surgeries, I felt like every single medical exam was low-key traumatic.
Yeah.
Just being in a doctor's office is low-key traumatic.
Yep.
And
it definitely is for me.
It was like the world changed with that.
Yeah.
The butt problem's still not fully resolved. It did get a lot better. But, since they didn't know what it was, I don't know how to follow up with them and be like, yeah, it's still a problem, but not as much as a problem. and I don't know how to go to someplace new and be like, I'm having this problem, but you can't touch my butt until like we know each other better.
You need to at least take me to dinner first.
Yeah. Or pet my dog.
Yeah.
And you know, the student health, I've been a couple of times. One time I was having like extra bad intestinal cramping to the point where I thought that I might have to go to the ER, like maybe something burst or something. You know, like something had to be really, really wrong, because I always have, you know, I mean, not like always, but like I'm used to getting intestinal cramping, fairly painful intestinal cramping. But this was like something's wrong. And I found out later that it was related to just like a mental break I was having at the time. And I went to student health. It was super late at night. It was right after a group therapy session I was going to. And there was only a nurse on call. So we sat in her office and she talked to me, and she was actually lovely. I think outside of the gender specialist, she was one of the best doctor nurses I've ever talked to. Because she's going over all these things, and asking me to take my temperature and asking me if she can do this and that, and going over all the things that like my random intense cramping might be, and you know, sort of in the end says, you know, like your appendix hasn't burst. If it did, these would be the symptoms you'd also be having. This hasn't happened because you'd be experiencing these symptoms if it had. And then sort of ending and saying, you know, like, I don't want to say that this is just stress, but finals are coming. Like, I don't want to, like, she did say, like, I don't want to invalidate you and say that this is just stress. But do you think it could be? Because I can't think of anything else it could be. And asked, like, are you prone to that? Finals are coming up. Do you think that's what it could be? I'm going to give you some ibuprofen and some Tums, and you can take them. And you know, if you're still worried about it in the morning, I'll put you, like, right now I will put you in to speak to the doctor about this in the morning. Even if it clears up, still feel free to come in and speak to the doctor about this. You won't be wasting anyone's time. And my big concern was, like, do I have to go to the ER? You know, like, I don't know how to assess if I need to go to the ER.
Yeah. I have no idea. I have no, because, like, you know, if you do have chronic health issues and you've had all this, you know, really nutty stuff happen throughout your life, you know, if you were to use the metric of like a normal person, quote unquote normal, as to like when you're supposed to go to the emergency room, you'd be there constantly. So it makes it really hard to like figure out like, okay, so when are things actually an emergency?
Yeah, and I know that if I do ever need to go to the ER, my parents need to be there.
Yeah.
Because I can shut down and go nonverbal,
Yeah.
and that is one of my worst fears, is somehow ending up in the ER and not being able to talk. And you know, even recently I've started to have this problem again, where not only do I go nonverbal, but I become paralyzed and I can't move. Like, other people can move me. But like, you can just sit me down in a chair and I'll sit there and I'll not move and I'll not talk and I'll not be able to. And inside I will silently be screaming at myself to move. I'll be calling to other people for help, and I'll not be able to do anything. So the thought of that happening terrifies me.
Yeah,
I
that's
live
really
alone.
scary.
I don't have a roommate who can come and get me. If something goes wrong and I can't reach my phone to call 911 or to call the campus EMTs, like, I'm just going to be stuck there.
Yeah.
I could die. I bring that up a lot. Oh, I could have died. But you know, that's the concern. And she was really wonderful about saying, like, this is when, you know, like, this is why you would need to go to the ER, and this is when you should. If the pain persists after you take these things, and if you can't sleep, you should go to the ER. And I'm like, what? If you can't sleep, you should go to the ER. What is she talking about? There have been so many times pain was so bad I couldn't sleep and I've been on medication.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. She's got to be wrong. But I ended up coming home to be with my parents and to be with my dog, or my parents' dog. I have my own dog now. Because it was like it was probably stress related, it was mental health related, and I just really needed to be with them that night. So I came down for the night. I went up to classes the next morning, and by the time that I was in the car with my dad halfway home, the pain was gone. Or as gone as it gets.
Yeah.
So, and it was, I miss my parents a lot as a college freshman, living alone. I see them a lot more than I know other people see them. But like, I need a service dog, and they were the people who were my service dog for years of my life. I miss them all the time.
Aw.
Yeah.
Well, that's sweet.
Yeah. It's so complicated, though.
Yeah, well, it definitely sounds like it. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of this with me. But I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, I hope you do too. I have some dogs to walk.
All right, well, have fun.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to In Sickness and in Health. Check out the links in the show notes to learn more about some of the things we talked about today and today's accompanying bonus episode. You can find more from us at insicknesspod.com and on social media at insicknesspod. If you can take a few moments to rate and review the show on iTunes, it helps other people find us. And don't forget to be excellent to yourselves and each other.